I am at CPAC on Thursday, Friday, Saturday of this week. We'll be broadcasting from there. And I have tremendous news. A good friend of mine and a guy who has not been invited to CPAC until last year has just been named to the board of directors. My good friend, Dr. Jasser, who you started the, what is it, the
American Islamic Reform for Democracy.
Right, but the Muslim Reform movement.
Yeah, we just launched that 2 months ago, and it's just taken off with 14 organizations, coalition of patriotic American, Canadian, European Muslims who believe in the Western way of life of freedom and are fighting against political Islam.
Real quick, I just want to see if you think I'm accurate on this. Just like Martin Luther was an extremist in his time, okay, now he's not, but in his time, because the Catholic Church held such chokehold on Christianity, he was the extremist, although now we would look at it the other way, but he was the reformer. In a world where we hadn't been calling ISIS the extremist the whole time, you're really the extremist, aren't you?
Well, if you listen to the Saudi government, the Wahhabis, the Muslim Brotherhood leaders in Egypt, they do consider us the extremists, the secular extremists who they say we hate our religion and call us apostates and do what they are really doing, takfir. But we love our faith, just like the founding fathers loved their faith of Christianity against the theocrats. And that's where Islam is in its time in history, is that the real protectors of freedom are those Muslims who want to fight for our faith, but yet want none of the theocrats in government. We want to separate mosque and state. That's what our Muslim Reform movement is all about. Our main mantra is that ideas don't have rights, human beings have rights, which actually speaks to exactly what you're saying. They say we're extremists because we reject the whole concept of Islamophobia. Islam doesn't have rights. Muslims might have rights. Human beings have rights. But Islam is an idea. So right now, the leaders of this idea globally are theocrats and running state identity movements that are the greatest threat to the West and civilization.
So here's one of the reasons why I never really kicked back hard on CPAC not inviting me back, because Grover Norquist is on the board of directors, still on the board of directors. I'm not going to ask you to comment on that. But he is, right now, there is a movement to have him pulled off the board. There's a recall vote happening in the NRA right now to recall him off the board. But one of the reasons why CPAC bothered me before is because he stacked the people that were talking to the young conservatives about the future and about Islam. He stacked it with a lot of Muslim Brotherhood bad guys.
Well, I think, what I hope I bring to the conservative movement and the ACU board and others is I think it's time for conservatives to come to terms with where we are right now in the battle within the House of Islam. And whether it's Grover or others, it's time to hold them accountable for where they stand inside the House of Islam against the Islamists, be it the Saudi royal families, the Wahhabis, the Muslim Brotherhood. If they can't articulate that political Islam and all of its machinations, be it political Islamic parties, be it Sharia in government, be it the chopping of hands, apostasy laws, blasphemy laws, if he can't and others can't be clear about where they stand, I'm sorry, they're not part of the constitutional fabric of America and don't believe in liberty the way I see it as a conservative with libertarian leanings.
Talk specifically here for a second, if you would, to the charges that have been made for the NRA. If you're a voter for the NRA, if you're a member of the NRA and you're voting to recall, do you see Grover Norquist the way I see him?
Well, I can tell you right now, in the 21st century, if you look at who protected America from the Cold War and the threat of Soviet communism, it was Ronald Reagan. And if we're looking for conservative leaders in the 21st century, our Second Amendment is the most important. I have Syrian family right now dodging carpet bombing from the Russians, from the Assadists, and if only they had a Second Amendment. So my parents became American and believed in America because not only of our First and our Constitution, but our Second Amendment, the ability to bear arms. So I hope the NRA can believe that it should have a board of individuals willing to stand up not only for that Second Amendment, but for believers in our liberty and our Constitution against Islamism. And if they're forming organizations like the Free Islamic Free Market Institute and other things that he did, and he's unable to make a stance clearly against political Islam, that's not somebody who should be leading a Second Amendment group and other things. So, I'm not going to get into that debate about internally with Grover, but our leaders in the conservative movement need to be clear on political Islam. And if they're not, they're a liability, because they're going to continue to make us into apologists with all the theocrats and the autocrats of the Islamic world that have been brewing this cauldron that right now we are dealing in a whack-a-mole fashion.
Tell me what it means to put you on the board at CPAC. Tell me what it means for CPAC, and tell me what it means to you, because I've watched you for a long time be marginalized off to the side because of people like Grover, who, you know, thinks that you're just a voice that isn't necessarily one that should be heard over the Muslim Brotherhood. And I've seen you marginalized, and I've seen you at times say, there are other voices. I can give you a whole bunch of voices that should be heard, and none of these people on TV are the people that you should be talking to.
All right.
What's it mean for you now to be on the board of CPAC?
You know, I wish my grandfather and my father were alive to see this. You know, it's been an honor to not only participate as a speaker last year and this year. I'm doing a talk on political Islam and American Muslims, how much we need to lead in fighting and defying the Islamists tomorrow afternoon on Thursday. And on Saturday, I also want a panel on the chaos in Europe with K.T. McFarland chairing that. But, you know, more so as the board, as a member, I think it shows the courage of our board, because it's so easy. I mean, people blame Obama for being an apologist for Islamism. President Bush also went to the Saudi mosque, did not take on political Islam. Now, it was a different time. It was pre-ISIS. The Arab awakening changed everything. So in some ways, I think the comparison is a bit unfair. But the Republicans have our problems internally with apologists for petro-Islam and the Islamists that brew these radicals. So the ACU, I think, has been demonstrating. Matt Schlapp, with his chairmanship, and Dan Schneider, who's been a good friend, you know, show that they have trust in me, in the Muslims that are leading this reform, that, you know what, this is what the American experiment's all about. It's taking some risks, but in the name of freedom and liberty. And you know, that's why I serve in the U.S. Navy. I think there's no better country in the world to let me be the Muslim I want to be. And part of giving back to this country is serving in the ACU and protecting conservatism.
I will tell you, this Matt Schlapp is the reason why I'm getting involved, because I've seen some of the moves that he has made. I don't know Matt myself, but I've seen some of the moves that he's made, and he's moving CPAC in the right direction. And I can't tell you how happy I am for you. Really, truly happy.
Remember, you had me on first on CNN back in '06. I wouldn't be who I was if it wasn't for your trust.
That was the first interview you did?
That was the first national media interview I ever did.
Wow. You're amazing every time. Thank you very much, Zudi. Back in just a minute.